Before I hand over to Emily, where she can report back on the Chatham House, we'll deal with the thorny topic that we don't know about. Please follow us on social media channels. Let me think. Hit subscribe to this channel if you're looking at this on YouTube, and also follow us on the Apple podcast. And please also rate and review, particularly if you do like this podcast. Emily, you've been to Chatham House. You've been having a proper talk amongst the learned and the great, the quality from London,
yes,
who really know deep about things. And you've been looking at post-quantum encryption. So this discussion is assuming that quantum is going to be developed and it is going to succeed, quantum computing, and when it comes out, that's going to have an impact on encryption. What are your key takeaways then from that discussion?
Thanks, Lucian. Yeah, it was a really good discussion held under the Chatham House rules, so I can't reveal the identities of any of the participants or attribute to them. But
just something you said to me was it's one rule at Chatham House. People tend to talk about the Chatham House rules. Yes. It's one rule, and that is that you can all meet, you can all talk about stuff, but you're not allowed to attribute anything.
Yeah. And you can also, I think something that people don't realise about the Chatham House rule is that you can use any of the information.
Right.
So that's really important. So it's a way of getting stuff out into the policy debate, but without putting people on the spot or getting them into trouble. And it really works with people either in major corporates, where you have to have all your lines cleared before you open your mouth, or in the public sector, where they're not actually allowed to say a lot of stuff.
Right.
It can really help to free people up to really just sort of talk about problems.
It doesn't really work, does it? Because like I attended a Chatham House ruled meeting in Washington last year at Meta headquarters with a lot of stakeholders, and people have been quite openly talking about things that I may or may not said.
Yes, that was a very interesting interpretation of the Chatham House rule, where you ended up being hauled over the coals by people who weren't even in the room about remarks that had been attributed to you. Ooh. That is a classic breach of the Chatham House rule. And in Chatham House, that would mean that those people and their organisations would never be invited back again, because they clearly can't be trusted.
Wow.
So
that's something that I'll discuss with my lawyers.
Well, it's not a legal binding thing. It's a sort of a matter of trust. So anyway, about quantum.
Are you suggesting that Washington doesn't follow by the same rules?
Well, there's certainly a lot of self-importance there. So you can say, this is under the Chatham House rules. And so you can make people feel very, very small. But actually, the adherence to the rule is what it's all about. And so if you can't do that, then, why say it's under the rule?
So anyway, we had this quantum encryption discussion, and Alice, before I'm going to hold back on the headlines, because we discussed quantum in some length, and you last week did at least half an hour on Wikipedia looking it up, and we discussed how it's essential, the positive sides of quantum. It would exponential speed up of complex problems, advanced AI and machine learning, and revolutionizing cryptocurrency, which we discussed, and security. What do you think of Emily's view that we know nothing about it?
Well, I did half an hour of Wikipedia, so yeah.
Actually, everything you said was 100% correct, but
because it was more about the hardware of quantum than encryption and cryptography.
Yeah, so where I felt like there could have been a little more precision was on. So what's the impact going to be on the strongest in sort of forms
fair
of
enough,
encryption
but
now?
it doesn't exist yet, does it? So not knowing about something that doesn't exist
sort of key takeaways. So the Australian Cybersecurity Centre have actually published a timeline of get ready for quantum. So by 2030, they say, you have to have done your process of discovery. So not even implemented anything, but you have to know which are your most vulnerable things, and I'll come back to that in a minute. I think the UK may be likely to follow suit, perhaps with a slightly extended timeline. So that means that we're talking to 5 to 10 years out before you even have to really be,
ready,
knowing the size of your problem rather than implementing. It's what's called a 3 CEO problem, right? Because, when you think about corporate priorities and how long people stay in position,
right.
This is a very big thing requiring lots and lots of investment, but nobody taking those decisions is likely to still be in the workforce when it comes into
assuming that they spend 3 years max as a CEO in any organisation.
Well, it's 10 years before you have to have a plan.
Oh, right. Oh,
it's going to be even longer before you have to actually have done anything.
Oh, gosh, this is sounding like UK health planning, where they're giving themselves 3 years to have a talk.
However, it is really serious because, as Alice informed us last week, the thing about quantum is, with superpositioning, you're going to have things that are no longer a 1 or a 0. It's going to be a 1 and a 0, something in between, all at the same time.
Yes, well, we do know about that.
Exponential capacity.
Kieran, as an empty-headed discussant, where does this leave you, this extra sort of, round table information on the... I
didn't say anything about Kieran at
all.
all.
Oh, right, I said... it was me.
Don't be mean about Kieran.
For a while there, I was getting excited. I was thinking, this might be a sea change in how we talk about tech policy and that we're actually thinking about the impact of this and planning for it, as opposed to what we normally do, which is sort of wait, panic. But then we're saying we're putting them out 10 years out there. So I imagine there's going to be lots of Chatham House discussions, and then we're still going to be panic stations when someone actually comes up with the equivalent of ChatGPT on quantum.
I think you're absolutely right, Kieran. But it is really interesting. That was one of the key takeaways. So it's a 3 CEO problem. Don't panic, but do prepare. Cryptography changes all the time. The strongest forms of cryptography are constantly overtaken by technology. And obviously the key thing that people are afraid of is that with this increased capacity in quantum computing, then the strongest forms of cryptography that we know today will be trivial to break with brute force.
Right.
Okay, so get ready. And the baseline, in terms of what I was really surprised about, is people are actually preparing in key industries that will be affected.
I saw in America
I was amazed by
a
that.
competition to get that just anyone could submit new algorithms for quantum cryptography.
Yeah, the NIST competition.
Yeah, and some of them were broken within 3 minutes using a normal computer, but they took the top kind of 4 or 6.
Yeah, they've made 3 new standards, and that I think is an amazing piece of imaginative policy making because it's stimulated academics and innovators to really think about solving the problem rather than describing the problem, which is what most policymakers do. And yeah, Kieran's point, it struck me as well that most tech policy is like, oops, this happened. Oh my God, what do we do to rebuild society now that this has happened? But 2 things. One is that there is a sort of 10-year run up, and also that there's a total acceptance that government have a role in, stimulating standards, in helping to guide and give guidance to critical infrastructure and key industries. So sort of whereas 10 years ago we go, government doesn't have a role to play in tech policy, there's now an acceptance that it's actually a major stakeholder, and if it's not engaged, then industry are probably not going to get ready.
And I think this whole topic, post-quantum and this preparing over long periods of time is really all about sort of getting the kit together. And you've been talking about encryption, but I've also been thinking a lot in the news this week. We've been talking about these rare minerals, and that comes us nicely to our next topic, which is lithium. Which is a very precious mineral in the Ukraine. And it seems that, Russia's obviously been positioning itself to just have that and take that.
Yeah, by actually invading.
Over the last 3 years. And now Trump has joined the debate and said, well, actually, no, we'll have that, this European mineral. So and when you think about quantum, it's obviously going to be impacted by the availability of materials like lithium.
And what's lithium used in?
Yeah, I mean, it's essential for batteries. Its demand is rapidly increasing, and it's also very much a linchpin in the geopolitical supply chain. And I'm interested that, Australia, Chile, and China are lithium providers and are really positioning themselves in these supercomputer debates. And so I'm not surprised that Australia is driving this conversation, because who's going to be supplying the lithium to drive these massive computational this hardware is going to be key. And obviously Trump's decided that he wants that, and I'd say Trump doesn't even have to invade Ukraine, does he? He can just. It seems.
No, why should he? Why should? That's a lot of trouble for Trump. I think that the king should be given what his tribute. I mean, I think this is the world we're in now, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I'm about to commit a crime, so I'm just going to praise him, and with any luck, he'll.
Yeah.
Can I just ask you a question? So you've got Trump sort of saying, well, we will have that, because that's obviously super valuable in the future. But not only that, I'm going to send my engineers in to dig it all up and have it, at least half of it. Zelensky's kind of gone, well, sod this, Europe's not really helping me out. So yes, you can have half of it. And Europe's kind of in this sort of nebulous position of just fighting itself. But Trump's now saying, and Europe, you've got to guard it. You've got to guard Ukraine while our engineers remove all of the minerals.
I think that's a very wise thing of the king to say, isn't it? So he gets all the benefit.
Yeah, if he gets
doesn't
Trump Gaza,
have to put any lives on the line.
Yeah.
Kieran, what am I missing here? I don't mean to just single out Kieran, but I want to give him a chance. I
think somebody in the Trump administration that has his ears read that book. What's it called? Guns, Germs, and Steel, and decided that this was the solution for everything. And so they said, right, here's what we need to do. We need to get control of all these minerals. Then we need to get control of the transit, and then we'll be great. And thereby completely ignoring how the world works. So we're in this very unusual place.
Ignoring how the world works, Alice?
with...
You got these superpowers saying, Europe, we will have this, and so Europe's like, sure.
There's this video I'm thinking of, well, there's two now. There's of Macron with Trump, and now Keir Starmer with Trump. And I think the camera person deserves some kind of like BAFTA award or Emmy award for their incredible cinematography, because Trump's there being like, just says a lie, which is that, Europe loaned Ukraine all this money and they're getting it back. And Macron's like, I'm going to have to stop you there because that's just wrong. It's not a loan. We gave them money, and the camera is on Trump and it sort of pans out to show Macron. And then this week, Keir Starmer was there in the same chair, in the same room, and Trump says the same lie, like word for word. Europe gave all this money to Ukraine, and now why aren't we getting it back? And the camera pans out from Trump to Keir Starmer, who says, well, actually, it wasn't a loan. We gave the money. And it's like,
the
same shot.
Emily, I'm going to ask you to respond on this Trump-Ukraine lithium thing. In the meanwhile, Alice is our guest. You've got the Guilty Pleasure and Tech Room 101 coming up. So get doing your homework. Get doing your homework. Fine. There's a piece of paper. Do your homework.
Something to add to this.
Yeah, but Keir Starmer's meeting the European heads in London this week for an emergency meeting after his meeting with King Trump. Where are we at now? What are they going to talk about?
After meeting his royal Trumpness, I think they're all just like, we are so screwed, because Europe now has to completely find money to put into its own defences, having, frankly, not put enough money into defence. It can't rely on the US anymore. And apparently being an ally now means, actually, it's like, I'm giving you this, what do I get? So it's much more like a protection racket than it is a sort of NATO alliance. I think that Europe's got to really get its act together, and it could be Europe's modern defining moment if everybody steps up and goes, right, we are now responsible for our own defence, we're responsible for the threat on our borders, let's see what happens. I mean, another factoid, just while we're talking about the sort of, things that you couldn't imagine now happening. Apparently all the national parks staff have been fired in America. Have you heard this, Kieran? And the proposal is, apparently now the national parks are just going to go to rack and ruin.
You mean like Yosemite?
Yeah, and you think of the grandeur of the US national parks, one of the most wonderful things.
Well, also like Yellowstone, which could erupt and kill everyone in the whole world. Just get rid of all the stuff. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, so
but are the park keepers stopping it erupting?
There's no park There's no park keepers.
Right.
What we're going to do now is to turn over these spaces to mineral exploration and mining and all sorts of stuff like
Kieran,
that.
you lived next to these parks.
Yeah.
Do they matter? Do they count?
Yeah, they do. They're absolutely fantastic. The parks are in America. Yellowstone's a good example. Yosemite's another great example. Absolutely fantastic. And it is one of the sort of abiding, wonderful things that America has managed to keep hold of. These are vast lands, and they're beautiful, and they're worth a lot of money. And so far, until His Royal Highness got in for a second time, they've been very fiercely protected. And I think this is just an effort to unwind that. It's a real shame. And it is, it's also affecting a lot of businesses. A lot of businesses use parks and give guides in parks, and a lot of Americans for their holidays go to these parks. So it's going to bite. It's going to take years for it to bite.
But if you dig up Yosemite and you find lithium there, then the engineers presumably are visiting the parks. You've still got a sort of ecosystem all around the parks.
It's a beautiful vision you're painting.
Yeah. That's a world we all want to live in. Oh my God. Right. Apparently there's a subreddit called Leopard Ate My Face Party.
I never thought the leopards would eat my face. There's a TikToker who made a song which is like, I never thought the leopards would eat my face, and she like sings it over people being like, they're getting rid of all my healthcare. Like, I voted for Trump. It was meant to just be like the immigrants and the poor people, and now they're getting rid of my healthcare. And she sings her song of like, when you voted for the leopards eating people's faces party, why are you now surprised that the leopards are eating your face?
Right.
That's what they do.
Thank you. This is becoming slightly surreal. So.